Thanks for joining us today. For a bit of context, over the last few years, the CTC has highlighted funding opportunities with the Department of Defense. At over $2 billion in SBIR or SBIR and STTR funding, the Department of Defense leads the SBIR budget. I'll go ahead and acquiesce to that this time around. The DoD and particularly the Air Force are driving change based on a growing need for competitive, innovative solutions. The CTC was fortunate to get a federal and state technology or FAST partnership award through the SBA to help build bridges between civilian and Wisconsin Air National Guard towards innovative solutions. And the resulting ForwardWERX initiative is developing tools and programs to increase Wisconsin's participation in Air Force innovation. However, one key to these opportunities is connecting local needs to the national Air Force goals, and that is why we are so very fortunate to welcome Carl Buhler here today as a new vendor with the CTC and a resource, hopefully, for Wisconsin innovation. Carl is a retired Air Force Brigadier General who is now consulting with companies as they pursue Air Force SBIR opportunities. And as the CTC supports the Air National Guard and the ForwardWERX initiative, Carl will be tapped to help Wisconsin pursue Air Force opportunities. So, Carl, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, appreciate it. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Before we dive in, can you give us a little bit of information about your background?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. And thanks for everybody for joining today. It's awesome to see you all online. Yeah, first of all, as Adela said, retired Air Force Brigadier General. I'm a two-time Major Command Director of Logistics, Installation, and Mission Support. Was also the commander at the Ogden Air Logistics Complex, one of our Air Force depots, and then also was a wing commander at the 78th Air Base Wing at Robbins. And then one of the things that I found was most beneficial for my afterlife of the Air Force was I was one of the individuals that was charged of leading the budget building process called the POM, which many of you are familiar with, for the entire Air Force A4 portfolio. So very interesting dynamic to see how the Air Force budget is built to participate in both the Air Force Board and the Air Force Group. So thank you.
So, I'm very curious about your transition into the SBIR world, and especially with your understanding and background and seeing the AFWERX program come on board and then making this transition. SBIR is not an easy transition to make. And so I'm just kind of curious about that experience for you.
First of all, I asked this to a lot of folks that are on active duty prior to the 2018, 2019 timeframe. A lot of them never heard of SBIR or STTR. It wasn't part of their repertoire. It wasn't something that they did. The Air Force, as you know, in late 2018, 2019 timeframe, really came up and put SBIR and STTR on the map and put it more in the mainstream Air Force, specifically through their open topics, which you mentioned earlier. So my transition into this was when I was in an Air Force class with a bunch of general officers in the February-March timeframe of 2017. We had to come up with a big topic, and we spent a week with the Vice Chief of Staff. A lot of individuals came in. Hondo Gertz he was at the time was with SOCOM. Dr. Roper came in, a whole bunch of folks. And part of that idea was to come up and create an AFWERX type organization. Didn't name it AFWERX, but it was an Air Force innovation type event. The Air Force, of course, has ran with that, turned it into what it is today, combined it with the SBIR funding, and it's been a very, very big effort overall for the Air Force. And for me personally, it's been awesome. It's been most awesome for one perspective. One, it's a great way to see companies and their technology get inserted into the Air Force, because while I was serving on active duty, we would have a lot of vendors, a lot of different small businesses, big businesses come up and talk to you about their technology, but it was virtually impossible to find a way to actually inject that in and to buy that technology. This has created a door that people are really, really having the opportunity to enjoy, and that's why I like it the most.
So we didn't talk about this in the initial planning of our discussion, but I am curious, since we do have members from the 115th joining us today, how have you found the SBIR world and the AFWERX program and opportunity impacting or affecting those that are in the military? Have you seen some kind of step up and put forward innovations, or has this become a burden? How does this become a collaborative opportunity through this program?
Yeah, it's really, really grown. When the process first started, there weren't really anything at the different bases. It was all individuals. People were getting pursued through LinkedIn contacts, relationship contacts, friends of friends, family members. And some people said, hey, this is a bit of a burden. And so they started putting up what I would say some, um, trying to find the best word to say, but they try to build a method where you could insert technology. And a lot of bases created spark cells. I think that's a fantastic opportunity because not only does a Spark Cell take in unsolicited inputs from small businesses about their technology, but that it can also drive very specific mission needs that they need by submitting either their own or submitting through the Air Force process. Hey, we're really looking for this technology. Does anybody have this out there? Or more importantly, if a vendor does contact them and it's technology that they need that's going to enhance their mission, then they can directly sign up to try and partner with that organization if they're selected for a SBIR or a STTR, and then they can get their mission needs met right away. I can't tell you the amount of success stories that I've seen by organizations that were, I'll use the word desperate. They were desperate for a different technology, and through happenstance, hard work by a lot of different folks, they were able to sync up with a company that was awarded a phase 2, and now they're actively using their technology, and things have transitioned since then to what we call phase 3, which is actually sales of the SBIR phase 1 or phase 2 technology. So it's great for the Air Force organizations, while simultaneously being great for our nation and the small businesses itself.
So let me make a transition here because I see the push. I see the the outreach to encourage more small business, to encourage more innovation, and especially to encourage diversity in terms of what kinds of innovations and small businesses do participate in Air Force SBIR STTR and Air Force innovation funding. Carl, can you tell us a little bit more about what you and your clients are seeing? What are some of the changing fundamentals in the Air Force? And let me just first start off and say, is this, for lack of a better term, does this feel very real, or is this really a push for a culture change? Are you seeing small businesses gaining new access to have conversations and see if there's a real fit for their technology into into a solution set?
I do, and that's a great question. I say it's a mixed bag right now because sometimes a company will have great technology, but they can't find an end user or an Air Force customer. So that's a bit of a difficult effort that both sides have to take a look at on what they can do to allow companies to talk to them about needs that they have. Simultaneously, it's not a foolproof, perfect panacea, if you will, for everything right now. I still see some frustrations with some companies because they have a great technology, but they can't find that person in the Air Force, or they can't find the use case. More importantly, the ones that are in a phase 2, quite often what I see is they can't find Air Force organizations that either A, want to buy their technology, or B, that they don't have the money. It's more often the latter case. And so that's why it's a crawl, walk, run campaign, both during the SBIR process and then after the SBIR process, in order to try and make sure that there are funding avenues and then the company and the technology speak for themselves.
I think some of us on our side of the table are familiar with the SBIR STTR, the phase 1, phase 2 process. For those that are new to the SBIR STTR world, those that are joining us from the 115th, can you tell us a little bit about the process as you've seen working with companies going through that particular program?
Yeah, definitely. Quite often there's an open topic that would come out. I'll speak specific to that. This current round that is about to come up is AFWERX is not going to have an open topic, but SpaceWorks is going to have open topic, we believe, based on what we've been reading in open source media. But in effect, a company will apply. There's different criteria in the request for proposal. The companies will submit the actual RFP, and then a panel of judges will score and then either select or not select the company. Sometimes you'll see a select but unfunded, which means the company and the technology were good enough, they met all the criteria, but unfortunately they ran out of funds prior to being able to award all the companies that. After that, there's a phase 2 round, and there's two ways to get a phase 2. One, you can do a sequential phase 1 to phase 2, meaning you're in a phase 1 for the approximately 90-day period. An RFP comes out, request for proposal, and then you have approximately a month to a month and a half to 2 months after that, depending on when it's in pre-release or a release, and then companies will apply through the phase 2. There's also a non-sequential process where a company that has either had a phase 1 or they have not had a phase 1 can do what's called a direct to phase 2. And then there's a separate RFP set of criteria that a company has to show, and then they get scored. Quite often, again, you'll see select, unfunded, but under the selects, you'll see either select and funded or select and unfunded. And that's always a tough thing talking to small businesses that spent all that upfront effort and all the hours that it takes to put things together to get a select and unfunded. But it should speak to the opportunity that exists for that company. And I say persistence is the best. I've seen companies put in 3 to 5 times and they've actually been selected later on in the process.
So what you describe is a pretty generic process for the SBIR or SBIR program if you're going through any one of the agencies. And I think there's some really interesting changes in the use of contracting mechanisms to make the AFWERX's open topics process different from the kind of the traditional way things have gone. Can you kind of at a very high level highlight some of the changes from the maybe traditional specific innovation requests, such as the broad agency announcements process versus this open topic CSO contracting mechanism?
Definitely. Specifically to the open topic, this is one thing that some folks have a hard time understanding. It's not open topic for anything necessarily. It doesn't mean just because a company has a technology that the Air Force will need it. Rule number one is there has to be a mission need and it has to potentially fill a mission requirement. So the key right there, and I think this is where the opportunity lies, and that's really the deep essence of this, is helping to articulate the benefits of your technology and putting things on an end user or an Air Force customer's radar that they may not think about your use case. And that was actually part of the process of why an open topic was created. Specifically for prior contracting, the Air Force, the DoD writ large, but the Air Force would say, I have a problem set and I'm looking for a solution for this specific problem. And then companies would come out and they would build and tailor their product and they would put in a submission and try to compete for that contract award that way. Whereas with the open topic, the Air Force typically has 5 or 6 areas, I'm calling them focus areas, and then individual Air Force bases can list, there's actually hundreds of them, where they can say, I have a specific mission need. So targeting either one of those main focus areas or targeting those very specific mission needs that Air Force personnel have submitted are the benefits of the open topic. A BAA is also, they also have BAAs, broad area announcements, where they'll put out, and they also use SBIR dollars, so it still is a SBIR funded contract, but those are quite often specific. Like, we are looking for a technology that specifically fits this area. They're both very, very beneficial. Some companies will say, hey, I actually have, they'll have this dilemma saying, hey, I can submit via open topic or the BAA. My advice is to submit to the BAA in that specific one, because you know that there's a specific need and there's going to be potentially contract dollars that are going to be put against that very specific mission need. On the other side, if you look at the BAAs and you don't see something where your technology is a perfect fit or even a fit on the fringes, then looking to make sure that your technology fits one of the focus areas or the specific mission needs that the Air Force personnel have submitted, that's a great route, because if you tie it to one of those, I would argue your probability of win will drastically increase. I've helped probably over 100 plus companies on their SBIR journey over the last 3.5 years. And that's always been a very, very good recipe for success, is really knocking those down and spending the upfront time to put your Air Force hat on, looking for Air Force references where somebody in the Air Force or somebody has stated that they have a problem, because you're articulating this to people that will score your package. And that's overall is the kind of at the higher level, the difference between a very specific broad area announcement and a open topic, but both use SBIR dollars in this particular case.
I think it's helpful to have an example of kind of helping an existing, because one of the things I think important for this program is that the Air Force is asking for dual use technologies. And so it's not seeking a brand new IP, but it's about taking existing technologies and trying to apply them to mission specific activity here. So can you give us a couple of anecdotes around how to help companies make that transition?
Yeah, so on the dual use technology I think it's interesting and important to explore the reasons behind it. Over the years, the DoD, the Air Force specifically, I'll use the term, it's my word, has been saddled with technologies that they've purchased, and due to a whole bunch of different reasons, they're the only consumer, would be the Air Force, of this specific technology. So they don't have anybody to help offset the cost for recurring engineering. It's hard to get away from a technology. There's a whole bunch of different things that cause the Air Force to be the sole consumer. And if you're the sole consumer for something, you can just imagine, I'm not an economist by any means, but you can imagine that it gets to be a lot more expensive. Well, if you have risk sharing, both from non-recurring engineering and you have other consumers that can take the burden off the Air Force, then the Air Force just becomes a consumer of that technology. That's where the dual use is very, very important. We're still operating a lot of Vietnam era equipment to this very day, just for that very reason. And the Air Force is the only organization that uses that. I would argue in a lot of cases, buying a technology made in 2021 as opposed to 1967 is probably a little bit better and more efficient in a lot of different ways. So that's the importance of looking at that dual use. And I don't know if I answered the essence of your question, Doctor.
Yeah, no, I think that the essence of it and just the statement that this is an approach to look not just for, it's not new IP necessarily, it's about fitting it into the needs in the Air Force.
And really, I mentioned earlier, putting your Air Force hat on and looking for examples. Um, Quite often, and I've had a lot of good success with this, but Air Force personnel won't think, oh, I can have X technology and apply it to Y problem. And so being able to help articulate that in your proposal is, one, it's difficult for folks that don't have Air Force experience, but two, if you're able to do that, it really resonates well. And so leading off with what is the problem? A lot of people on their proposals, probably one of the biggest problems I see when companies write proposals, is they write very generic, overarching, oh, my technology can solve X. And it's the whole gamut of what X would be, as opposed to, here are several different use cases where we can see our technology. I've had folks in the Air Force go, had I not read that statement, I would have not known that this technology could be used for that. So it truly is putting it on their radar. And don't assume that the people reading about the technology are necessarily subject matter experts on every nuance of your technology. Feel free to articulate that and be very, very clear on what the technology is about and its potential use cases.
So maybe if in an example it is helpful, but I also want to get at that there are so many new spaces for you to understand what the Air Force needs and to participate. We met you through the Patriot Day program that was here in Wisconsin. There's the Spark Cells that you mentioned earlier. There are these kind of pitch competitions where companies are getting some innovation funding through a mixture of CSO and Squadron Innovation Funds and all that stuff. Can you tell us a little bit about the landscape where people can begin to participate and learn what some of the mission needs might be?
Yeah, and you mentioned several of them, and as I mentioned earlier, there's discussion right now to expand this to all the different services, which is actually very, very good. Of course, the SAM.gov website lists the current openings that are out there. A lot of people will look at those and say, well, I don't know what exactly this means, but AFWERX also has webinars on a varying basis, where they'll have Ask Me Anything. I highly encourage companies to attend those because they are actually very informative, especially for companies that haven't been in this space for a while, to understand And then, of course, once you apply, they'll have specific Ask Me Anything events, webinars, usually on a weekly to biweekly basis, that talk about the actual upcoming rounds. And those are great forums because you can ask specific questions to actual Air Force personnel that are in the space and get some guidance on the actual application process at that time. And then, of course, the pitch days. A lot of people are confused because they see the different pitch days. There are various program offices that have their own pitch days outside of AFWERX, and there's also different bases that will have their own pitch days outside of AFWERX as well. So I would just call them additional opportunities, and maybe or maybe not, maybe or maybe they don't have the same application process. More often not, I've seen applications for base pitch days that are one pager. You just submit a one pager on your technology, and if the folks at the base look at it and say, "Oh, this is good," you can get an invite that way. So there's a lot of opportunity in this, and I do believe the market is going to grow over the years.
So one of the things I find as a challenge is to figure out best ways to encourage communication between kind of the small businesses and the military communities. And especially with all the variety of funding events and opportunities, how do you advise companies prepare themselves to compete? What are some ways that they can do some pre-work, some pre-networking, and what are some best practices for communication?
That's fantastic. The first one is, don't be enamored with your technology. I think that's rule number one. I tell every company that I advise, a lot of companies will just articulate the benefits of their technology, and that's great. But don't forget, you also have to you have to connect the mission need for the Air Force, and you may have to connect it to someone who's looking at your proposal to understand. So spending time on LinkedIn, attending the different webinars, reading current news, trying to find out. Like for instance, the Air Force had the Air Force Association National Convention last week. There's copious articles on all the various generals and senior leaders that spoke at the National Convention and talked about what the problem sets are from their foxhole and what they're seeing. Those are very, very powerful because they'll give insight at the very strategic level. Some will give very, very specific examples. So that's a very, very good thing, in my opinion, to look at. Reading Air Force white papers, reading the Air Force Science and Technology strategic plans, studying what Agile Combat Employment is, ACE, which the Air Force is really focused on moving forward on how we're going to fight future wars, seeing who our current enemies are, reading that in national news. Everything that I just mentioned as specific examples was talked about at AFA last week specifically. So I think just knowing and trying to get your mindset or company's mindset into, okay, and then brainstorming with people, not just people that are in your company, but other people. Hey, do you see a potential use case for this? That's probably when I have calls with companies initially, we usually spend a good 30 to 40 minutes just talking about use cases. And typically, I would say most of the time, it's almost 180 degrees off from what they initially believed on how you have to articulate it. So it's very, very powerful. I'll give you one real world example. This company does, I can't talk specifics, but they do a type of imaging, and they automatically looked at, hey, here's the type of imaging that they could do. Well, after doing some research, learning that they're on a path that might show success in about 7 to 8 years, we changed their use case around to something that is viable today, that the Air Force has a very big need. And there were articles on this very big need. They looked at their technology, made a mental mind shift and said, yes, my technology, I believe, can solve this in a phase 2 R&D effort over 15 months. I believe I can get after that problem. They articulate it, and they're in a phase 2 for that very specific technology, which was never on their radar on how it could be used. And quite honestly, the Air Force colonel that signed the memorandum said this has been a nagging problem for years, and I wish someone would have brought a technology. He never even would have thought that this technology existed. And sure enough, you mated some intelligence with an actual need for the Air Force and a technology, and that's going to solve an Air Force problem. Because if the technology doesn't solve an Air Force problem, you have no ticket to the dance.
I think also you made a point about the time frame. We're not looking at innovations that are 2 or 3 or 7+ years out, which might be appropriate for another agency. It's about 6 to 18 months is what I've heard are really good fit feasibility studies and application studies for the SBIR sitter process?
Definitely. There are some that are further out, depending on, what they are. But if you look at it, this is taxpayer money, which is given, and you look at how the venture capital world works. They want a return on an investment. That's why the Air Force does too. The Air Force doesn't want to just give seed money. That's why SBIR is called America's Seed Fund. They don't want to give seed money just to a company to advance that. They want to have to solve their mission need, but more importantly, they want to get a return on their investment. I've heard from some Air Force leaders that they're looking at 18 months return on their investment from conclusion of the phase two. That was just an individual. That's not Air Force policy, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the Air Force at all. But that's kind of a mind frame. But then again, I have other technologies that I've helped companies on that their return on investment is going to be a little bit longer. But you start getting out much further than that, then there's probably better other routes to take.
We have about 3 minutes left. I will take questions in the chat. There was one question that was asked around how to get in touch via email. Sometimes it's very difficult communicating via email with members in the Air Force. Do you have any best practices for effective cold emails?
Yeah, it's interesting. That's a lot of people. That is the number one problem. If you can establish a mission need, that being the number one problem with technology. But number two is they don't know how to talk to people in the Air Force. And I will tell you, a lot of people in the Air Force do not want to talk to companies. They don't want their email or their LinkedIn screenshotted and posted and said, well, this person said. So they're very adverse to that. But I will tell you, the Spark cells are a great avenue, and be persistent on the Spark cells. Don't just say, well, I sent it to 5 bases and no one replied back. Follow up is pretty important. Sometimes I've noticed too that a lot of bases, your email will get stuffed in their spam box. And so, following up is very, very important. But Spark cells didn't exist for a lot of companies when SBIR, the open topics CSOs started a few years back. But those are a wealth. I would tell you that has made it so much easier for companies to get in is with the Spark cells. That's the very first one. The second one, LinkedIn. LinkedIn has been very, very effective to just say, hey, I would love to arrange a call with you. Here's what I have, blah, blah, blah. And when I say very effective on LinkedIn, I'm talking about maybe at the 20 to 25%. Because when this started, you could send out 100 notes and you may get 0 responses back. But so getting 20 to 25% is pretty high in my opinion. So definitely have to try those 2 routes for sure.
I don't see any new questions, but I will ask this. There are people interested in how to get in touch with you, and I will do 2 things on that. You can definitely tell us like what's the best way, email, contact information, that kind of thing. But I am also asking if you want information, like what readiness level should a company be at before they reach out to you?
It's a tough one because someone from the Air Force say, "Oh, that's wrong." So I mean, I've seen it changes. It changes between rounds. A few years back, the scoring was weighted, and it was weighted, and it said in priority order. The very next round, they changed it and said they're all going to be equally weighted. So sometimes there has been in the past pushes for lower TRL levels, and sometimes there's been pushes for higher TRL levels. I would hesitate to give a specific number, but I would say, hey, can we get through a 15 to 18 months phase 2? And then within that 18-month window, in other words, can I articulate to the Air Force that in 3 years, I can help give them a return on investment? If that's the case, then I say you're going to have a very, very good shot.
Sounds great. Well, seeing no additional questions, I want to give you the last word, Carl. I thank you very much for coming on our quick chat. We look forward to working with you through some of the programs that we have and the ForwardWERX initiative with the Air National Guard here. Any final words to both members of the military that are joining us today and also members of our small business community?
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks so much, Doctor, for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. I'd say first to the members of the military, use those Spark cells and get with AFWERX and get your mission needs articulated through the correct channels so small businesses can see, oh, there's actually a need out there. That would help a lot of different companies. And then 2, for small businesses, I say be persistent, don't give up. There's a ton of companies that have applied and have not succeeded, and it's frustrating for a lot of different reasons. But the nation needs it. innovation is very, very important to the Air Force right now, which is why it's a continuous process. But always go back and try to do a self triage of your proposal and find out, hey, why didn't this work? And sometimes you may not know, but talk to other folks that are outside of the network that you don't necessarily know. Reach out to folks and, hey, can I get some feedback, or try to arrange a call or something like that. That way you're just not, shooting into the dark. So I wish you the best of luck on the SBIR journey. I believe, Doctor, that you have my contact information, so you know how to handle that for moving forward. But I love this business. I think it's a trifecta, knowing that the Air Force wins, knowing that small business and technology wins, and ultimately our nation wins. That's awesome for me. I love it. I love helping small businesses. My wife says it gets me jazzed all the time. It truly, truly does. It's fascinating. The technologies that I've seen and heard, I wish I would have had access to pulling those into the Air Force while I was on active duty, because it's amazing what the small businesses are doing today. And I applaud each and every one of you for your persistence. So thanks so much for joining today.
Thank you so much. For those on the call, I will say that we will have some other opportunities to engage Carl in the coming year. Consider the Milwaukee Startup Week event. I believe we have it scheduled for the October 23rd or 28th. We'll put out a link to those that are joining us. And so there may be another engagement there with Carl. And then some activities that are coming on board with the Air National Guard and their ForwardWERX program. So thank you all for joining us today. And Carl, thank you so much for this introduction. And we look forward to continued work with you.
Definitely look forward to it. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Y'all have a great
Bye,
day.
everybody.